After decades of living with the threat of nuclear war and total annihilation, a popular movement to abolish nuclear weapons once and for all is exploding around the world. This idea begins the final chapter in a story of struggle between two competing views. One that held nuclear weapons are a fact of modern life, and those who say they are morally wrong and should be abolished. That story begins in Japan at the close of World War II. On August 6, 1945, the atomic age begins with the bombing of Hiroshima. The blast from a bomb named Little Boy destroys most of the city. 140,000 people are killed. Nagasaki, Japan is destroyed by a second atomic bomb on the 9th of August. 80,000 people are killed. World War II is over, but the misery from burns and radiation poisoning continues. The destructive power of nuclear weapons is witnessed with horror by the world. The world had already responded to the horrors of World War II by establishing the United Nations in 1945 to maintain international peace and security. In 1946, reflecting the hopes of the people everywhere, the first meeting of the United Nations General Assembly commits itself to work for the elimination from national armaments of atomic weapons and of all other major weapons adaptable to mass destruction. The United States learns that its monopoly on the atomic bomb is over on August 29, 1949, when the Soviet Union demonstrates its atomic bomb on the steppes of Kazakhstan. And with that blast, an uneasy balance of nuclear terror is struck between the two emerging superpowers with their opposing political ideologies. The nuclear arms race begins. Great Britain joins the nuclear club in 1952. As the possibility of annihilation by nuclear war becomes an emerging reality, people around the world begin to speak out. Despite the growing opposition by religious leaders, governments, and citizen groups, the nuclear arms race continues. Albert Einstein and the well-known philosopher Bertrand Russell release a manifesto declaring that atomic weapons have become so dangerous that war must be banned, writing that they fear, if many bombs are used, there will be universal death, sudden only for a minority, but for the majority, a slow torture of disease and disintegration. At the United Nations, the Soviet Union proposes the creation of nuclear weapon-free zones. Yet the arms race, driven by nuclear testing, goes on. Tests on both sides continue, underwater, underground, and in the air. Atmospheric tests create radioactive fallout. Breathed in, it triggers cancer and other illnesses. On the ground, fallout poisons the food chain. The environmental effects of nuclear testing spur public outrage worldwide. The campaign for nuclear disarmament in the UK demands that Great Britain give up its nuclear arsenal and ask the United States and the Soviet Union to do the same. In America's streets, women lead protests over the discovery of radioactive fallout in milk. Still, the nuclear club adds to its membership. France conducts its first nuclear test. Growing concern among people and governments leads to a major diplomatic step away from nuclear war. The signing in 1963 of the Partial Test Ban Treaty by the United States, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain. The treaty limits the effects of nuclear testing on humans, animals, and the environment, but has no impact on the nuclear arms race between East and West. Nuclear testing moves underground, and the number of tests increases greatly. In 1964, China conducts its first nuclear test. Throughout the decade, nuclear stockpiles grow in size and sophistication, driven by the doctrine of mutual assured destruction. Nuclear conflict is to be avoided or deterred by the threat of massive retaliation with nuclear weapons against the side that uses them first. This deterrence strategy requires that hundreds of millions die and the world itself be destroyed by radioactive fallout. War is no longer about defeating enemies in battle, but the destruction of humanity. People around the world responded to the doctrine of mutual assured destruction with outrage. Most nations, especially those that are not aligned with the United States or the Soviet Union, believe their safety lies in ending the arms race and abolishing nuclear weapons. By 1968, the United Nations General Assembly approved the text of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or NPT, to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and weapons technology, to advance nuclear disarmament, and to promote cooperation in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. Yet, 10 years after the adoption of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the United States still has more than 24,000 nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union, 25,000. Together, Great Britain, France, and China have hundreds more. A single nuclear bomb in use by the United States Air Force in 1978 was nearly 500 times as powerful as Little Boy, the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. Together, the nuclear arsenals of the United States and Soviet Union combined contained the explosive power of 1.5 million Little Boys. Deaths from a full-scale nuclear exchange are estimated in the billions. The aftermath is described as a nuclear winter, where radioactive dust and debris block the sun, destroying Earth's ecosystem and starving additional billions of people. Alarmed by the accelerating arms race, the UN General Assembly convenes for its first special session on disarmament. The goal is to work towards a global strategy to end the nuclear arms race. The General Assembly declares, mankind is confronted with a choice. We must halt the arms race and proceed to disarmament or face annihilation. The confrontation between East and West has many fearing that the specter of a nuclear war is becoming a permanent fixture in the lives of all the world's citizens. Across the globe, civil society groups embark on a different confrontation. In the United Kingdom, as many as 70,000 people protest at the Grenham Common Air Base, where U.S. weapons are deployed. In the U.S., a rally against nuclear weapons in New York Central Park draws nearly 1 million people. Whether it was for strategic military reasons, effective diplomacy, or in response to the growing chorus against nuclear weapons, President Reagan of the United States and General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev of the Soviet Union ordered their mid-range missiles removed from Europe and destroyed. It is the first time nuclear-armed states agree to eliminate an entire class of weapons. The removal of intermediate-range missiles from Europe adds energy to the growing civil society movement to abolish all nuclear weapons. In Kazakhstan, decades of testing at Semipalatinsk have sickened thousands and caused terrible environmental damage. A movement to eliminate nuclear testing springs up. A sister organization in Nevada, home of the U.S. test site, joins the Kazakhs to underscore the importance of a global nuclear test ban. The development of nuclear weapons is driven by nuclear testing. Tests have occurred all over the world. The United States and the Soviet Union between them conducted nearly 2,000 tests. The United States conducted a total of 1,032 tests in the Pacific and at its test sites in and around Nevada. The Soviet Union conducted 715 nuclear explosions at Semipalatinsk, in the Arctic, and elsewhere around the Soviet Union. Hundreds more have been conducted by China, France, and the United Kingdom. The Semipalatinsk test site is an environmental disaster for over 1.5 million Kazakhs. The soil and groundwater have been contaminated by radiation from some 468 nuclear tests. In the same year that the Berlin Wall comes down, symbolically ending the Cold War, the Soviet Union conducts its last nuclear weapons test at Semipalatinsk. The United Kingdom conducts its last test in 1991, and testing in Nevada stops in 1992. By this time, nuclear testing has led to approximately 60,000 nuclear weapons. Other parts of the world choose to become nuclear weapons-free zones. Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Central and Southeast Asia, the South Pacific and Mongolia. With the breakup of the Soviet Union, the United States and the new Russian Federation agree to make major reductions in their nuclear arsenals. A number of nuclear-capable states that may have been envisioning a nuclear weapons program have abandoned them. South Africa developed nuclear weapons and then destroyed its capability prior to joining the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1991. Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Belarus gave up nuclear weapons after the breakup of the Soviet Union. Momentum for a global ban on nuclear testing builds. In 1994, the United Nations Conference on Disarmament in Geneva, Switzerland, begins negotiations on a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty, the CTBTO, a treaty that will ban all nuclear explosions. The United States continues its moratorium on testing. Other members of the nuclear club feel the pressure from civil society to comply. France closes its test site in the South Pacific. With the CTBT months away from a vote in the United Nations, China stages a final weapons test, then declares its own moratorium. The text of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty is approved in the United Nations General Assembly by a vote of 158 in favor. An end to nuclear explosions seems inevitable. India, which conducted a single test in 1974, tests again in 1998. Pakistan responds with an underground testing program of its own. People's concerns echo the findings of the independent Canberra Commission set up by Australia in 1995. So long as any state has nuclear weapons, others will want them. So long as any such weapons remain, it defies credibility that they will not one day be used by accident or miscalculation or design. The fear also exists that a small group could steal or buy nuclear materials to make a bomb. Easily smuggled into a metropolitan area, many worry about the impact of a dirty bomb. A conventional explosion that could spew radioactive material and create chaos and contamination. At the other extreme, an actual nuclear detonation in a large city would kill hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people. Today's threats from nuclear weapons are many, including accidental use, the escalation of a military conflict, or use by terrorists. In the face of these threats, the norm against testing is already fact, with near universal support from the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Without testing, it will be difficult for any country to develop nuclear weapons.
In New York, more than 190 countries agreed to move towards the elimination of nuclear weapons. It's important to close the door to nuclear weapon developments. And the Test Ban Treaty is part and parcel of this program.
Nuclear tests by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in 2006 and 2009 demonstrate not only the dangers of nuclear weapons proliferation, but also the capabilities of the international monitoring system. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization provided precise and uniform data about the tests to all members of the Security Council ahead of their critical deliberations. Today, nations possess over 23,000 nuclear weapons. President Barack Obama of the United States and President Dmitry Medvedev of the Russian Federation, who command more than 90% of the world's remaining nuclear weapons, recently signed an historic agreement to further reduce deployment of their arsenals. The Cold War is long over. The world's concerns have shifted to other pressing international challenges. In 1991, President Nursultan Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan unilaterally shut down the world's second largest test site. Recently, the government of Kazakhstan and other like-minded countries sponsored a resolution for an international day against nuclear tests. The resolution was adopted unanimously by the General Assembly on the 2nd of December 2009. The Secretary-General visited Semipalatinsk in April 2010 and described President Nazarbayev's decision to close down the test site and banish nuclear weapons as an act of extraordinary leadership, a visionary step, and a true declaration of independence.
I will urge the leaders of Russian Federation, United States, and other nuclear weapon state leaders to abandon all nuclear weapons.
Since 1945, governments, groups, and political leaders have worked steadfastly with international organizations, including the United Nations, to bring about a world without the threat of nuclear catastrophe. Non-aligned countries and other nations from all corners of the globe, along with civil society, led the effort to eliminate nuclear weapons during the Cold War, and they lead the fight for a safer world today. They recognize that an historic opportunity exists to outlaw nuclear weapons once and for all. The 2010 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference Final Declaration recognizes the overwhelming interest by a vast majority of states to explore alternatives for achieving the abolition of nuclear weapons, either by way of a nuclear weapons convention or a framework of related instruments, as the UN Secretary-General has proposed. Nuclear abolition has been humankind's goal since the dawn of the atomic age. The world cannot wait for another Hiroshima or Nagasaki, or worse, to find the political will to banish these weapons. At a time when epidemic disease, poverty, hunger, and threats to the global environment require enormous resources, trillions of dollars have been spent on nuclear weapons. The continuation of wasteful programs that ignore basic human needs and human rights, and that endanger us all, will be overcome by a public determined to make a better and safer world for us and our children.